16-time WWE World Heavyweight Champion, John Cena!
Standing in front of a sold-out crowd and introducing 16-time WWE World Heavyweight Champion John Cena. If it had all ended there, that would have been enough. All the things that were slow about baseball, we have removed. Our sport is growing. You live for those emotional responses. When Cody Rhodes finishes the story, that feels amazing. You want people to feel emotionally connected. That's what wrestling does, and that's what Banana Ball does. When I said to everyone, give me your voices, and I'm looking at that Fenway Park, it's Hogan, Rock, Austin, and Cena. Because those four guys transcended professional wrestling. Thank you for believing in me a few years ago, and happy to be one of the guys that now you can look back on and say, look where they are now, and turns out it's a pretty cool place.
Rewind, recap, relive. For over 50 episodes, the revolutionary force in wrestling interview.
It's been over 3 years since I've had this guest on alongside the legendary Joel Gertner, and since then he's had a ton of success, namely with the Savannah Bananas, hyping up potassium enthusiasts far and wide. Please welcome back to the show the young professor, Matt Graifer. Matt, how are you?
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
I'm good. It is awesome to see you back. This is the second Where Are They Now that I've done with one of the rising stars I had on back then. And when I had you on then, your schedule was super busy. I think you were around 3 years into your wrestling career around then. But I mean, the stuff you've done since is wild. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, the schedule has not let up, that's for sure. But that's a good thing, right? I mean, the opportunities have gotten bigger and better. So that's what you want to see as you're on your way up. Is you want to see growth, and I've been fortunate to have a lot of growth since the last time that we spoke.
Yeah, you definitely have. Well, I was actually going to say when you joined, I didn't say it, but amazing shirt.
Oh, thanks, man.
Very
Well,
nice shirt.
keeping it colorful is kind of the name of the game for me. So
You've got to, and that leads into my next thing. I have to talk about the suit game because I don't think I've ever actually seen you wear the same suit twice.
I have. That would be a fallacy to say. It is not a bottomless bucket of suits, but there is a rather generous rotation. That's for sure.
Bottomless bucket. That's great. Tell me about that though. Getting more into like the fashion and the character, because I know you were doing it with the young professor, which you still are the young professor, but still,
Right.
I feel like it's opened up so much more with especially with the Savannah Bananas, the colors and everything.
Well, I mean, I probably started doing that about a year or so before I talked to you, and even then I started kind of slow and started adding more things in, and I do think that was a difference maker. And it's interesting because had I listened to what the traditional advice would have been for announcers, especially at the time, was be very straight laced, be very don't be too colorful, don't stand out, don't peacock too much. And the truth is, the second that I started changing up what I wore, it's not like my skill set changed dramatically overnight. It was the wardrobe change, it was the aesthetic change, how it looked, what the presentation looked like. And as soon as that happened, that's when the calendar really started filling up, and it was a big difference maker. I mean, it's an entertainment, it's showtime. It's everyone is a part of that show, and they should look like it, in my opinion. I think there's ways to do it and ways not to do it, but being a little more colorful, I think, opened a few more doors for me than had I stayed, in just blacks and blues and kept things very muted. I don't know that the same kinds of opportunities would have made it my way.
Yeah. No, and you wear them well. You definitely do. Before we get into how you actually join the Savannah Bananas, can you tell us who they are for someone who might not know that much about the team?
Sure. We are a derivative of baseball that is all entertainment. In fact, I dare say, here's something that people will relate to if they're listening to your show, is we are sports entertainment, because that's really what trade we are in. It is very much sport because we have real athletes out there. They're real baseball players. They have grown up playing baseball. They've played varying levels of baseball at the collegiate and professional level. Some of them even into like being on their country's national teams and AAA baseball. And we have entertainment all around it at all times. I mean, we've got ring announcers, which is not something that you would see. Usually an announcer is just a voice in a booth in the sky at a baseball
Right.
game. It only says names and a few, commercial reads. We've got cheerleaders. We've got male cheerleaders that are all the dad bod dance squad. We've got Bananas. We have an all grandma, dance team. When we're at home, we have a youth dance team that's there. We have a magician that comes out sometimes. We've got DJs and bands and you name it. It is nonstop action and entertainment. And people probably have seen us across social, particularly on TikTok or on their Instagram shorts, with a lot of baseball players dancing in the middle of the game, dancing as they throw a pitch, doing backflip catches out in center field or even in the infield. I mean, you name it, we are pushing the boundaries of what is possible in a live, actual sporting environment.
No, I mean, you say it right there. I found out about them first through you. I saw your social media and I saw you join and everything, and they're super entertaining. I feel like the first thing that came to my mind was the Harlem Globetrotters, very Harlem Globetrotters-esque.
That's the comparison that we get the most often. And it's a comparison that I think is warranted in the sense that they are essentially entertainment basketball. But it's one that we don't wholeheartedly clasp onto, despite how much people throw it at us, which it's obvious. But the biggest difference is it's a work for the Globetrotters, if that makes sense. Like you go to a Globetrotters game, you know who's going to win that game. And for us, our guys are playing. The two teams that are on the field are vying to beat one another. And that's, I think, what makes it more interesting than anything else is you really don't know how things are going to shake out. And it really goes down to the wire almost every single night. Just the way that our rules are designed, there's never a blowout. It's always close, and there's always a chance right at the end. So people stay right to the very bitter end of our games because they want to know how it's all going to wind up.
And that I feel is rare too, to stay to the end of a baseball game, at least for me. Any game that I've gone to here, I feel like you get your hot dog, you watch, and then if they go more than, I don't know, 6 innings, 7, then you're seeing your way out. Yeah.
Right. Beat the traffic. That's
Yeah,
kind of the way
exactly.
it goes. Well, one of our rules of Banana Ball is we have a 2-hour time limit. And they did a lot of research early on when the team started out. They just like shot video and took still photos every 10 or 15 minutes to see what point of a baseball game do people typically start checking
That's
out.
interesting. Wow.
And they found it was about that 2-hour mark, which usually corresponds around that seventh inning stretch. All the things that were slow about baseball, we have removed and taken out. So we're getting 9 innings in almost every time in those 2 hours or within like a few minutes over the 2 hours. Because we have to start the ninth inning before the 2 hours expires in order to have ninth inning. Otherwise, whatever inning we're in, that's the final inning of the game. Because we want to keep it to that if our first pitch is at 7, that game is wrapping up by 9, unless we have to go into a showdown, which is different than extra innings. If they're tied at the end of the game, we go into a one-on-one showdown, pitcher versus hitter.
Wow. Can you take us through that? What a one-on-one showdown looks like? So it's pitcher
Yeah,
versus.
it's wild. I mean, it's like a shootout in soccer or in hockey. There's potentially multiple rounds, depends how it goes. So the pitcher's job is to strike the guy out. The hitter's job is to get the ball in play. He's got to score around all the bases. So the first showdown is pitcher versus hitter with one fielder. So we've got a fielder. He has to be on the infield grass, but if the hitter puts the ball in play, fielder takes off and he's trying to beat the guy back to the plate. If he scores, the other team has an opportunity to answer back, just like in baseball, the innings kind of thing. So if they're able to answer back, we'll go to a second showdown. If there's a second showdown, it's just pitcher versus hitter. And if we go to a third showdown and beyond, we've never gone further than 3. We load the bases and put the fielder back, and every run counts. And so it's high energy. And if somebody hits a home run in the showdown, which has only happened once, if you hit a home run over the wall, game over, you win.
Instant, as it should be, right? I mean, that's amazing, right? Hitting it right over the wall like that. Wow.
Oh, I mean, what a way to end it. I mean, you want to talk about a walk-off, an exciting way to end the game. That's it. So those are all looped into the interesting rules we have with Banana Ball.
Well, so we know who the Savannah Bananas are now. When does this wonderful team make its way into your life, or you make its way into their life?
You know, it's interesting that we're talking today because I was looking through my own social media feed and going back to see my memories. On this day 3 years ago, I posted about the team saying that I was really excited to go and see my first game. I went in July 3 years ago. They were on my radar at the time. They hadn't blown up yet, but if you were paying attention to sports and entertainment the way that I did, they were on my radar. I had already picked up our owner's book, and it really spoke to me. I didn't know that there were other people looking at entertainment and looking at it the way that I was, just trying to create this incredible experience for fans. And that book really spoke to me at that time. And I was able to go to a game, but I posted about that 3 years ago today. And I went to that game, and I actually reached out to the owner because at the time, our owner, Jesse Cole, was a little easier to get a hold of than he is today. It's a little more difficult now. But I mentioned to him that I'd be coming, and he was like, oh, if you guys come out, I'll give you and your family a tour around the place, and I'll show you, and we'll talk about stuff. And I said, and by the way, I am an announcer, and I host in sports, and so I'll pack my tux just in case. And he goes, actually, I might have something for you that night, because that was the one night ever that our PA announcer, who's a really good friend of mine now, that his mom was sick at the time and he was going up to visit her, and it was the one time he ever missed a game. So they needed someone with my particular set of skills that night that I was arriving. And so it was very serendipitous, I would say, to fall into that. And then when they announced their world tour later in the year, I begged and pleaded to get on, and there was no real returns to have me back or anything like that. But I think I made enough of an impression for them to give it a shot. And I got on, and this is my third world tour. And now I am full-time. I'm our cast director and traveling all over the country, doing some of the biggest sporting venues in the world, and just bringing sports and entertainment to fans everywhere.
Well, I'm really happy to see that success. That is so cool, that story. I can't believe it's 3 years to the day, number one. Number two, that goes to show people, I feel, just reaching out. Why not, right? Why not just go for it? Yeah.
You're no worse off than you would be if you didn't. I've reached out to a lot of people, and some of them don't go anywhere. Some of them you hear back, and you never know. Shoot your shot. That's really you can only benefit. If you don't hear anything back, you are no worse off than you are in that given moment. So take a shot. Why not?
And where have the Savannah Bananas taken you on these world tours? Where have you been as a result of joining this team?
So, I mean, gosh, we've got 80, 90 games a year, and we're traveling everywhere. Last year, we were in 33 cities in 21 states. This year, it's pretty similar. I don't even remember the number. They're all starting to melt together. But this year,
A great problem to have.
it is. I mean, I say that casually, but it's just I'm in a different city every week. Like I just got home from Nashville, which I drove to because I was just in Boston the week before that. We sold out Fenway Park 2 weekends ago. So I was standing on the pitcher's mound and on home plate talking to 37,000 plus people at a completely sold out house in Fenway Park. We sold out Houston, Texas. We were at Minute Maid Park, home of the Houston Astros.
Wow.
We're mostly at minor league parks, but there's some of the larger ones now in particular. Usually every night it's somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 fans a night. And like we'll be in Indianapolis next weekend. I'm heading to Vegas tomorrow because our other team, the Party Animals, they're on their world tour as well. And the Bananas are off. And the guy who's hosting, who's a wrestler, he can't make the Vegas game. So I'll be hosting the Party Animals games in Vegas. So we're going everywhere.
The place. Oh my God. Yeah. And so Party Animals, is it the same, very similar to the Savannah Bananas? Also,
so we're playing this game called Banana Ball.
Right.
And need teams to play against. And so the rival of the Bananas is the Party Animals. They're the team that we have primarily traveled with. And so now they are embarking on, they started it this past week. They're on their own tour, separate from the Bananas. So doing a much smaller tour, but kind of similar to the one the Bananas did 2 years ago, where we went to 7 cities. Yeah. The Party Animals have like 15 games on their own that are not against the Bananas. We introduced a third team this year called the Firefighters. They'll be out in Vegas playing against the Party Animals, and it's sold out in Vegas to see those two teams. No Bananas around, but the Party Animals and Firefighters are, and it's sold out at the Las Vegas ballpark. So our sport is growing, and our reach and our ability to provide this type of entertainment to people is increasing, and it'll be exciting to see where it increases to in the next couple of years.
Absolutely. And so you joined 3 years ago. How long has it actually been around now, Banana Ball?
Banana Ball itself, they played the first ever game of Banana Ball in 2020. The Savannah Bananas, prior to that, they were a minor league baseball team, but not even affiliated minor league ball. They were a collegiate summer league team. So if people know anything about like how baseball works, I mean, you got your big league teams, that's Major League Baseball. They have affiliated teams, AAA, AA, and there's like 2 levels of single A baseball. And like guys that get drafted, they usually start in the minor leagues and work their way up. But there's other leagues. There's independent leagues that are not affiliated with that. So guys maybe that got injured or kind of washed out of the majors, but they can still play and they're looking for a shot back in, they'll play indie ball. Collegiate baseball players, like I know the College World Series has just been going on. When they are out of season, those guys go and they play for these collegiate summer league teams. The Bananas were one of those. They were in a league called the Coastal Plain League, which is in the Southeast, primarily against teams in Georgia and South Carolina. And we were a collegiate summer league baseball team. So they played regular baseball, but the entertainment was all around the baseball. So all the music, all the characters happened in between everything, but they'd have to stop when something would happen on the field. Now we don't have to stop. The music never stops. The sound effects never stop. The goofiness, the dancing, that stuff never stops. So the Bananas have been around since 2016, but the game of Banana Ball came around in 2021. And then last year, 2023 was the first year that we completely got rid of our ties to traditional baseball, and it is just all Banana Ball all the time.
That must be such a cool evolution to like watch happen through your eyes too. And coming from a world of wrestling, professional wrestling, I'm sure there are some things that some similarities there, of course, sports entertainment, like you mentioned. What are some skills that you learned early on in wrestling that you think you're using now as a frontman for the Banana Ball, for Savannah Bananas?
I mean, everything that I learned has been amazingly valuable. I mean, and really, I mean, even, I mentioned the host for the Party Animals. I recruited him out of wrestling this past year. His name is Mikey Galino. Some of your listeners might know him as Coach Mikey of the Ugly Ducklings, who's been running on the indie circuits for years. But Coach Mikey was one of our man-anas, but he's so good when it comes to entertainment because he's been working pro wrestling. When you're used to working crowds, sometimes small crowds, like a few dozen people, a few hundred people, maybe a few thousand if you're lucky at a big show that you get a chance to work, and you just learn how to use facial expressions. You learn how to use physical gestures that kind of help entice people to react a certain way. You learn how to talk into a microphone, how to get people to kind of react to things, cheap pops and cheap heat. And I mean, these are things that I use frequently. And we were in Fenway Park 2 weeks ago, and I was up on stage for our pre-show that we do. And I was asking for people to come up and do a fashion show. So because people usually wear crazy stuff to our stuff. So we get fan engagement, fan involvement. So we're bringing people up, and there's this kid with his hand up, and he's wearing a Yankees shirt and hat. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to bring him up here. Right. And as soon as he hit the stage, but like the I like, that's cheap heat. And he was an immediate heel. Like these kids, people are flipping off this kid on the stage. I'm having such a good time because I was like, who let him, pretending like I didn't let him up there. Who let him up here? How did this guy get in here? But that's wrestling. That is professional wrestling. It is creating those same kinds of emotional responses in audiences that you are going for in wrestling. I mean, the people who are listening to this, whether wrestlers themselves or fans, you know what it feels like to be at one of these shows. You live for those emotional responses, the good and the bad, the things that make you feel great. When Cody Rhodes finishes the story, that feels amazing. When The Undertaker was beaten by Brock Lesnar, that took the wind out of everyone's sails. Those are both excellent reactions because they are what we're designed to be. And that is what you want. You want people to feel emotionally connected to your performers, to your show. That's what wrestling does. And that's what banana ball does. So having that kind of experience and really grinding on the road at indie shows for years and working as often as I could in as many places and experiencing as many different crowds as I could, that helped me so much in my integration into this and has helped me kind of lend a hand where I can to help build this thing from where we were, which was impressive even when I came in, to where we are now, which is unprecedented. I mean, what we are doing, I don't know that there's anything you can compare it to. We were playing in front of crowds of 3,000, 4,000, selling out those places, which is impressive in minor league ball to begin with. And now we're selling out Major League Baseball stadiums 3 years later.
Yeah, I mean, it is incredible. And speaking of unprecedented, you've mentioned 37,000 people, Fenway Park. I saw that announcement, the opening you gave. It was awesome. I love the passion. And I mean, the place was electric too. Can you take us into your mind of, well, first of all, is that the biggest crowd that you've ever opened for?
Houston would have been the biggest. Houston had 41,000, just a bigger capacity.
Right.
But Fenway felt bigger, if I'm being honest. Probably because I knew where I was, and just the gravity of a place like that.
Yeah.
That place was built in 1912. Babe Ruth threw from that mound. When he was on the Red Sox, when they were good. I mean, it's the curse was there. They broke the curse. There's everyone who's anyone in baseball played at Fenway Park, and so to be standing out there and to stand on the mound and walk out. And when I said to everyone, give me your voices, and I threw my hands out and I just looked around. I have that
Yes.
second pause that I have, and I'm looking at that Fenway Park sign above me. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps talking about it again.
I just
Like
got
I felt
chills.
like it was like lightning shooting out of my fingertips. Like the energy is, if I could bottle that and sell it, I would be a billionaire because it was the most incredible feeling I've ever had.
When you're going through the motion of putting something together maybe before the show, unless you just wing it, but what is your mindset before you head out on the Fenway Park mound?
I mean, for that is a very memorized speech. We call it internally the hype intro because it's designed to just like fire people up and make them feel like they're ready to run through a brick wall. It's got this low, it's a Rocky soundtrack song underneath it. It's Going the Distance from Bill Conti, and it's just like building, 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 and then as soon as it finishes, we blow the cryo cannons and we hit shipping up to Boston, and the bananas come pouring out and cryo shooting everywhere. The crowd is just on their feet. That is designed very intentionally, and that's why I haven't wanted to change it and mess with it too much, because it's really tuned in. It really gets this huge raucous reaction, this build, 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 build explosion that we're looking for. So for something like that, it's just a matter of making sure that it's memorized and that I can keep doing it, which as many times as I've done it, I still get nervous out there. And sometimes I'll blank and I'm like, but my mouth keeps doing the work, even though my brain together. So that's good. But for a lot of other things, some of it is improv and on the spot. Some of it, whenever we put in a new activation, like a new promotion where we're doing a new game on the field, that I will rehearse, or at least I'll mentally rehearse what I'm going to say, how I'm going to say it, because you still need to be concise. You need to work quickly because our game runs very fast, and we're still jamming in like 17, 18 promotions in the middle of the game and still
Right.
keeping it under hours. So everything I do has to be out. We have to make sure our contestants are casted well, costumed up on stage, off stage. Our stage managers are moving people constantly. The baseball's coming on, coming off. We've got other performances happening. We had Major League Baseball players coming into that game. This past weekend in Nashville, we had like Chris Kirkpatrick from NSYNC came out and did the player dance with some of our players. These are all happening like in rapid fire constantly. So you've just always got to be really tuned in on what you're doing, know exactly what your outcome is that you want, and just go out and execute and wrap it up and get out of there and just be ready to move on to the next thing as fast as possible.
Right, the next city. After all that, just duplicated from city to city. That's incredible work that you guys do. Another time that your two worlds collided, was John Cena. You got to introduce him while you were at a Savannah Bananas game. What was that like for you? I'm sure the wrestling, not only the wrestling fan inside you, but the ring announcer that I knew 3 years ago must have been going crazy.
Oh, dude, it was very hush hush that he was coming, and to the point where we weren't supposed to know, and I had heard the night before, like a security guard or something mentioned something, and I got wind of it, and I woke up early that morning because it was the last game it was opening weekend. It was our third game. We were in Tampa. John lives in Tampa, and I texted our owner, Jesse Cole, because Jesse usually does the announcements for the special guests. I get to do some of them, but I mean, it's his team. He's the
Yeah.
owner. I get it. And we're both hosts. We both, pass things back and forth in terms of what we do. But I texted him that morning and I was like, hey man, a little birdie told me that we might have an interesting guest today. And being that I'm your wrestling guy that, is your wrestling announcer, if it is that person, I think I should be the person to do it. And the first thing he says back is, who told you? And I was like, uh-oh, well, I'm in trouble. Everybody's in trouble. This is because I'm like, well, I let him know. I was like, look, one of the security guys, it's not like somebody ratted it out and leaked it. So
Yeah.
it wasn't happen. It's like a security guard mentioned something about him coming today. And so I said, I'm just trying to get ahead of this thing. And he goes, okay. And then I went down, I was at breakfast, and I'm not saying anything to anybody. And I'm down at breakfast at the hotel before we're going. And he comes downstairs and I'm there and I'm not saying a word. And he just looks at me and he goes, hey, we'll figure something out. And I go, all right. And I, try to play it as cool as I can. But I knew that I was like, hey, I'm on. Like, luckily, I know where John's from. I know his weight. Like, I know his accolades. I have to do a whole lot of studying here. I mean, this has been my trade since I started in sports, and I was very excited. I tell people, and it's not a knock at the guy that the first ever wrestler that I announced through the curtain was a guy named Dirty Ray Sanchez, like Dirty Sanchez. Like that's the joke. Like that's the first guy I ever announced. That's not like a great start to an announcing career if you think about that.
What's crazy about you saying that is I feel like that just jogged the memory from the Joel Gertner interview. If you mentioned it on there, I don't know why I remember that.
Yeah, it was one of those things like Dirty Ray Sanchez, and now 6 years later, I'm going with the guy like John Cena is on my rushmore, and I don't say that just because I've announced him. He is I think he is one of the most prolific and accomplished performers that pro wrestling has ever produced. You can say what you want about technical abilities and matches and all that. I think the way I kind of rank guys is their cultural relevance, and it's hard to argue against John Cena as not being on that rushmore. To me, it's Hogan, Rock, Austin, and Cena, because those four guys transcended professional wrestling. They put it into a level of mainstream and public awareness that no one else did. Ric Flair didn't do that. Ric Flair, you could make all the arguments about him being a better performer, a better talker, and I think they're valid. But people know Rick now. They didn't know Rick the way that they knew Hulk Hogan. They didn't know Rick the way they knew Stone Cold Steve Austin or The Rock. John is one of those guys. So for me, a guy that started in a mall at a tiny little wrestling show with Dirty Ray Sanchez to then be standing in front of a sold out crowd and introducing 16-time WWE World Heavyweight Champion John Cena. If it had all ended there, that would have been enough. It would have been more than enough, more than I ever could have asked for.
Did you get any words of wisdom from the GOAT?
No, other than like him shaking my hand and saying, "Man, good job," and his like managers were like, "Dude, you're really good." That's enough. Like
That's really cool.
They know what's good. So if they tell you, that's enough for me. He was pretty popular and in demand that day. So I'm not trying to take more of his time than I need to. I'm trying to show up, hit my spot, do what I'm supposed to do a good job, and leave a favorable impression. He did follow me on Twitter afterwards, so
that's
I guess
huge.
if there's any he follows a lot of people on Twitter,
He,
but that
he
was
follows a lot, but the timing I think says something
yeah.
different about that. Yeah.
Yeah. and we put it out, and Michael Buffer tweeted about it and all
Oh,
kinds
yep.
of stuff. So it was pretty cool. It was a very, very cool couple of days.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's great that they told you. That's good too. I mean, that's a pat on the back moment. Not long after John Cena, anybody watching Raw, me included, I was watching live that night and I saw your face. I was like, what? Like, that's insane. You were on Raw, Savannah Bananas, the whole team front and center, right behind the commentators. What was that experience like being so close to the action?
Dude, that was cool. I mean, obviously, just being a fan of it since I was, 10, 11 years old. And really when I started this, I don't even know what my aspirations were. I just wanted to do it. But after a while, I thought, like, maybe I could actually do this. Um, and so, I guess initially the goal probably would have been to wind up in WWE or AEW or somewhere where I could do it for a living. Because there's really not many places that you can be an announcer for a living. Most announcers, it is a side gig. It is something you do in addition to whatever else that you do. And so those were, that was something that I wanted to do, but my career has run in a way where I knew I need to hedge my bets and do as many things as I could to find out some way that I can do this for a living. And it didn't have to be wrestling, but wrestling's always been that first love of mine personally. So when we had a chance to go and we were invited to sit smack dab behind the commentary team, being right behind Michael Cole, who I've admired a tremendous amount over 20 plus years of me watching, and sit behind Pat McAfee, who, any chance he got, he was turning around and he was chopping it up with us. It was very cool. And then, of course, getting to shake Samantha Irvin's hand and talk to her for a few minutes and just tell her how much I admired her work. It's very cool to now be like, these are people I admired, and I look at them now as peers. I still admire them, but I feel like it's a strange transition to kind of be in a place where you're mentioned in the same circles and conversations as these folks.
Yeah, the lines are definitely blurred. And like you said, I can't imagine what that's like mentally, for you, like making that transition. Are any other members of the team wrestling fans? Or are you the biggest one, would you say?
I'm probably the biggest one, especially just consistently. I know Stilts cried, like that. It's on video that we have, like when we put out the video of John Cena surprising everybody, like when he came back, like he like visibly was crying. He was so like
Oh.
shaken up by the fact that John Cena was there because he was a huge fan of his when he was a kid growing up. So there's a number of guys who are pretty big fans. I think Reese Alexiades, one of our outfielders, he's a big wrestling fan, and a couple of other guys as well. But I mean, I've watched pretty consistently and followed since 1997. So I think it's harder to find someone that's as diehard and hardcore as I have been over that much time.
Well, yes, and the reason I asked too is because not when was that? A bit later in the night, I think you did a backstage interview that you led for the team. And so yeah, being back there, that environment, what was that like? And also, how was the interview?
It was cool. I mean, they brought us back. The guys wanted to meet more of the superstars. A lot of the superstars had already
Right.
left. They were on their way to Orlando, so not many people were still hanging around. Liv Morgan was there. She had just won her cage match, and I have kind of an interesting history with Liv, just as a fan primarily. Like we used to go to, because I live smack in the middle of NXT territory, and when my daughter Lillian, who's 9 now, when she was first born, we used to go to NXT house shows all the time. I mean, like there were 4 or 5 shows within an hour of us. So we could go almost every week, and tickets were like $10. It was cheaper to go to an NXT show than it was to go to an indie wrestling show. So
Wow.
we were very diehard and would go. And when my daughter Lillian was really little, like especially she was getting close to her 3rd birthday, she loved Liv Morgan. And like we were making signs and t-shirts for her, and like Liv would interact with her, and we get a chance to, some of the NXT superstars would meet people before, and this is literally before I started anything in wrestling. And so we had gotten to meet Liv a couple times. One of the coolest moments ever in my entire life was for Lily's birthday. Liv came out. She asked us where we were sitting, when I ran up to the guardrail and I'm holding Lily over, and Liv comes out and she takes off her hat that was like a custom made, like it's not like, Bret Hart had a bunch of them.
Right, right.
One, it was in her promo pictures and stuff at the time, and she puts it on Lily's head and says happy birthday. Crowd, huge pop, like Liv is special to me for that, as a dad, as a parent. So I've kept up with her over the years. I've had a few other just interactions with her. We have a mutual friend that we know. So Lily was with me. So Lily got to see Liv and give her a big hug right after, and she remembers her because we had so many interactions. So between that and my other son Adam was there, and Sami Zayn was in the back, and he came over and said hello. So we had some really cool, very brief interactions. And then Kathy Kelly had us in the back to interview, and they were like, well, who wants to lead? And I was like, they all kind of looked at me. And I was like, yeah, this is probably my area where we could speak most fluently about our two worlds together.
Yeah, you really are like a translator, definitely between those two worlds. That's awesome.
Yeah,
You
asking
mentioned
about Braun Breaker, and
Ron
I'm like,
Burger, exactly, yeah.
so I've worked with Braun's dad and his uncle and stuff. So yeah, I know all these guys pretty well.
Well, you mentioned Samantha Irvin. You got to shake her hand, tell her how much you admire her. She's doing amazing things right now. Like, she's so unique with everything about her presence, her announcements. What do you think of her work? And also, were you able to chop it up with her in the back, announcer to announcer?
Not as long as I would have liked to. She's someone that I would love to sit down and just chat with, because I think she is doing what I had been trying to do for a long time, which is redefine what an announcer is capable of doing. You think about how announcers have been presented on television in particular for so long. They're an accessory at best. They really have not let them shine and let them do very much. And there have been some that have been extremely good. I mean, I was always a big Tony Chimmel guy. I loved Lillian Garcia. I thought Justin Roberts, particularly in his WWE run, was fantastic. I loved Greg Hamilton. Like when I was starting out, like he was the guy I was kind of modeling my style most closely after. But if you notice how they presented all of them, with the exception of maybe Lillian, because she sang a little bit and they would give her a little more, these guys were just out there to announce, and that was it. And they were in kind of plain suits, and maybe they'd be in a tuxedo for WrestleMania, and that was it. And she has really elevated that role. I mean, they've got a camera on her constantly. They're putting up, Instagram shorts and reels and other stuff that they're putting out into the world, focusing on the ring announcer and just her emotional reactions. And you watch, like she's reacting. These are things that I would do at ringside. When there'd be a near fall and it'd get to two, I would pick the microphone up, and whether if the finish of the match is coming, you need to be ready as an announcer. You don't know who's watching you, who's not. And to me, she has shown what I always kind of wanted it to be. They really put a spotlight on her. She's a fantastic dresser. She's got great style. She's got an interesting style where she can just really emote as an announcer. It doesn't just have to be this boxed in style, and it's having ripples. It's having effects in other places, and more people are benefiting from it. Again, I don't think an announcer should ever be the star of the show. And that's always, I think, the criticism that I used to hear, that people would say, oh, don't take the shine away. It's not. It's adding to the show without taking away. And I think she does that better than anyone right now, anybody in the game, period.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And an avid fan you are since 1997, you said, of wrestling, WWE probably since 1997. What are your thoughts on this new era? Samantha's certainly a part of it. This new era of WWE, though, the uniqueness and the really fresh feeling that it's giving off.
I love it. I don't watch as much as I should, but I keep up with it, and that's always how it's been. I'm on the road constantly, so I'm not catching Raw, I'm not catching SmackDown, but I'm always reading what's happening. I'm always watching the clips. I'm always following it. And I think it is as fresh as it's been in as long as I can remember. I followed pretty consistently since 1997. There was a time when I was in high school where I dropped off a little. Again, I would read the results of like what happened on the shows, but I kind of fell out for a little bit of the early Ruthless Aggression era, and then picked it back up when I went to college, and have been with it ever since. So I've been faithfully watching it. I think right now it's as exciting as it's ever been. There's just so many cool things happening. There's a really interesting uprising of superstars that are making a huge impact. I love that we're starting to see stories across the entirety of the card. You're seeing stuff happening on the higher end. You're seeing stuff happening on the lower end. It's not just focused on one performer anymore. You're getting stories with the Alpha Academy. You're getting things kind of brewing with Karrion Cross versus the New Day. You're starting to see a lot of things on NXT blending, and now they're crossing over with TNA, and so that's exciting for fans. There is just a lot happening in wrestling right now that I think is super exciting. And I know, like my son Adam, he watches it the most faithfully, and he is just freaking pumped all the time, like talking to me about what's going on. So anything I miss, he brings me up to speed on all the happenings, especially in WWE lately.
Yeah. I know. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly. WWE throughout the entire card keeps you engaged now, and the camera angles too that they're doing, like it all
Oh,
feels very,
production,
yeah.
yes.
Production is top notch, and yeah, it feels like they care about every single little detail. I think attention to detail is what I'd classify most about this era. Is that it doesn't feel like, okay, just put that out there, fill some time. It's like, no, we're gonna give everyone what they deserve. Like you said, Alpha Academy might be the biggest story going right now, and I'd also consider that more like middle of the card. I want to ask you though, Matt, you recently made a post alongside who you mentioned earlier, Mikey, your friend, and it was you two, and you said just a couple of wrestling bums who have climbed out of the bingo halls, climbed out of those weird venues to both doing incredible things right now. I thought that was an awesome post when I saw it. How does it feel to you that you're at this point now, looking back to what that post said, you in the bingo halls in the small arenas to Fenway Park?
Yeah, yeah, when I sent him that photo of the two of us, I took it while we were inside the Green Monster. We both had a chance to sign it as performers that performed there. And he wrote back to me, "There's just a couple of wrestling bums out here just doing it, living the life." And I that stuck with me. And so when I posted it, that was the caption that I put. I don't know if it's well received by everyone. It did get a lot of attention, but I think it's a message to anybody about what really is possible. I think everyone that laces up a pair of boots or in my case picks up a microphone and really makes a solid go at being a part of this world, and you never know. I mean, dude, I'll be honest, the day that I did the interview with you, I was in my car, if you
Yes,
recall.
I do.
And I was scheduled to do a TV taping, I say, in Miami. And I had actually gotten into an interesting, like, not argument right beforehand, but right after that interview, because I had a real problem with someone that was at that taping. And I don't use it, but like it is someone who's pretty infamous in Florida, um, that should not be around children and families, and they were there and their students were there and his girlfriend was there, and I was opposed to it, and I didn't want to be a part of it, and I was on the writing team for that show, and I offered, I said I will work for free. It's like, well, he's like, oh, I got to pay. I was like, pay them to go away. We don't need those
Right.
people for this show. I'm not working it. And I waited around all day that day. I did this great interview with you and Joel Gertner, which is somebody that I also admired. And I walked off that show that night. Like we got pushed for hours and hours. And um, I was in suit and I was ready to go.
Yep.
And he sat down and I was like, have we had any changes? Because all the cards still look the same. He goes, it's too late to change it. I went, I'm out of here.
No,
And I
yeah.
picked up my stuff and pulled the plug on the production, and they stopped, and the company fell apart 2 days later. But that
Wow.
was one of the scariest from a professional wrestling side of things. Now it seems so inconsequential, but at the time, as somebody that was really only in the bingo halls and in the medical supply warehouses and working in front of 20 people, but you're just looking for that next rep because you don't know who's going to see you and who's going to hear you, and it feels like everything you do matters so much that sometimes you're willing to sell your soul a little bit to just chase this dream. And I took a stand that day, and I was worried that it was going to completely sideline my career. Like, oh, this guy doesn't want to play ball. Like, who the hell does he think is? He's just an announcer. We don't need him anyway. And I wrestled with that all day and I had this pit in my stomach and nerves, and I walked out, and I drove 4 hours that morning to Miami to do the show, and just left and drove 4 hours back with nothing to show for it. And I remember how scared I was and how unsure I was of where things were going to go, because it was right at the time, it was the most frequent thing that was getting traction. I was getting to work with some cool names and some cool people, and I just completely pulled the plug on it. And that was so much of what I felt in wrestling and a few other places. And now I decided then to use my integrity, that I was like, man, I have my little girl, Lily, like, I can't work with a guy like that. I can't. Like, well, how can I look my kids in the face and say that I'm okay with people that do this? Because just because everyone else is like, well, I'm not working with them, they can hold their nose on it. I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And I decided to operate differently. And it wound up being probably one of the best moves I ever made in my career, because I wasn't afraid to say no anymore. I was started to kind of take bookings and things on my own terms. And if something didn't sit right with me, I didn't feel like I had to chase it anymore. And I started doing things the right way. And by doing things the right way, I've landed in better and better places. And now a guy that was just an indie wrestling bum that was scratching and clawing and maybe willing more at that time to sell my soul to get that next booking because maybe somebody will see me. I want people to know that you don't have to do it that way. You still got to work hard. You have to take a lot of bookings. You have to go places. You're going to work for nothing. It's going to be hard. But man, have some integrity, make moves that are smart for you as a human being, not just for what makes sense for a card or for just filling your weekend with a spot so you can say you had a match. Quality in addition to quantity, and make sure those quality things are there. And if you string it together just right and you work hard and you really treat people well and you do the right things, then my God, there's a chance that you could wind up in some pretty cool places.
That is a great story. I can't believe it took 3 years to figure out what you did after that interview. That blows my mind that that happened to you that day. But you made the right choice for sure. I mean, look at you now. Like you said, it's hard to follow what you just said, but I'm going to ask you my final question. It's been really cool having you back on here, hearing what you've done since. What do you see for the future of the young professor now that you've achieved? You're at a great point right now. Where do you see yourself going?
Well, I'm where I want to be, and this thing is growing, and I'm going to grow with it. But in addition to that, as the young professor, I'm still going to continue to do appearances outside of the Savannah Bananas, when the schedule allows for it. So there's a couple of months in between where it's a little easier. But I am also in the throes of writing a book on how to host, which includes how to be a ring announcer, because there are no books on this style of entertainment. And there are a lot of people who do it. And I don't think I have all of the answers, but I know I have some of them. And I have some solid advice and wisdom and some things that I think that I can share with people to help them be better, or for people that are promoters, that if you're hiring someone that doesn't know what they're doing, that maybe you have a tool to give some direction to people so that they can help make your show better in the ways that I've always tried to. So that's my biggest next thing that's coming up. I wrote the book last year. I'm in the throes of editing is the problem. Editing takes a long time and getting it the way I want, but I am very excited for it. I don't have a release date. I thought I was going to get it out this year, but man, this world tour has been kicking my butt a little more than I thought it would. So I'm hoping maybe by the end of this year, early next year, maybe to time it up with the launch of our next tour in 2025 is the hopes.
Must be good on the road though, getting time to edit, right? You must have a lot of time there.
Not really, no, not at all.
Not on these
Last year was
long
easier.
trips.
Last year was easier. I wrote a lot of the book on baseball stadium concourses and in locker rooms and in other weird places. But this year, now on the management staff, with the show growing, I'm doing a lot more setup, a lot more breakdown. The days are like 14 hours long. And so it's been a little different this year than it was last year.
Well, I, for one, will probably buy that book. I mean, I think hosting either in person or with how many podcasts there are right now, it could definitely be a very useful and topical item for everyone to check out. But I mean, like I said, it really has been cool hearing your journey and where you've been since I had you on 3 years ago. Like, it's amazing. It's really cool. Congratulations on all your success.
Well, dude, thank you. And thank you for believing in me a few years ago when I wasn't really somebody that was on much of anybody's radar. And happy to be one of the guys that now you can look back on and say, look where they are now. And turns out it's a pretty cool place.
Rewind, recap, relive. For over 50 episodes, the revolutionary force in wrestling interviews.